I was just doing the introduction, basically saying why we landed up with this topic. And does anybody here, is there anyone in the audience who does not know of someone who's had cancer? A friend or a relative? So probably none. So there is some kind of an established link. You don't know anybody? Okay, cool. But you know of somebody, I guess. You heard of cancer. Okay. So now we talk about the actual link between the two, now that we have got some kind of a vague relationship between the two. So when you look at the human body, you find that, we are composed of all kinds of systems which are intertwined and interrelated. And of these systems, we could be susceptible to different diseases, one of which I'm picking up as a case study here. On the other hand, if we look at the services environment, we find that it is equally complex, and we do have a lot of dependencies with a lot of partners. And if you look at the diagram, which I've taken from Gomez, so on the left you have, which is the traditional sphere of control of any IT organization. And once we reach out beyond our firewall, and then we are dependent on the ISP providers, on the internet, and the OEMs, and the users themselves. So there are different kinds of dependencies. So this is what we call the traditional zone of control, which is in our control. And the sphere of influence is what is outside our control, but we can limit it to some extent in terms of influence. For example, the Windows Phone has managed to influence its OEMs by saying, hey, this is how the phone should be designed, and we want it to be consistent. So within this kind of environment also, we come across a lot of issues which take place both at our side and also from a network kind of perspective. So these are things which impact the service, whether it is a configuration issue, a code issue, or it's just some network issue, or some performance, some load issue, or some geo-performance issue. So there are all kinds of issues which take place, which in the end impact the customer. So how then do we go about saying, hey, what are these issues? What are the things we need to do to have better own health and or service health? So when you look at the comparison between the two, entities, so from a human health perspective, we find that it typically follows a cycle which is fairly long, 50, 60, depending on your life expectancy, and the fact that, of course, you can't keep re-engineering your code. Unlike a service or a product, which you keep upgrading from Windows 7, 8, 9, 10, or XP to 2010, 8, whatever it is. And the only thing is, from a care perspective, yes, we possibly have similar types of care when you're bringing it into production. Like now we are pretty, careful about Apollo. And then when it stabilizes, we are relatively less worried. Again, when you're retiring it, again, you're worried because of migration issues and things like that. So when you look back and look at any organization, typically this is a framework I've put together which explains what is the relationship between the organization and the product we produce. In terms of which, this gives us some idea of the importance we need to levy based on the life cycle and how long and what is the longevity of that particular aspect. And typically, for an organization to function, whether it's based on an HR structure, it depends on the finance, it depends on the business model, and then we put together processes, and then we hire people, and then we say, okay, we are a projectized organization, we churn out products, and we also have operations, and which continue to, either feed an external customer or an internal customer. So when you look at typically service health management within that framework which I just showed, this is typically what Microsoft follows on the left, which everyone is familiar with. And on the right is what we have ITIL and the framework, which is typically planning, delivering, and operating. And all of us in this room are, aware of this, and we also deal with some aspect of this, like the architectural reviews going on, which is right at the design phase for some aspects, and right up to problem management, service monitoring, control, and operation. When you look at the self again, from a similar perspective, what is it that we do to manage our work, our health, and things like that? These are the typically three things which we need to know. We need to know what to do, how to do it, then we need to want to do it, and finally we get down to doing it. These are three basic things for anything. So if you find that at some point in time, one circle of this is missing, That's where your gap is, and that's what you need to address. This is related to our health, at work, or whether you're working alone, for yourself, or with a team. So let's now look at some of the issues which typically take place, which could impact you. This could be something like related to the body, to the mind. It could be because of some accident outside your control. And you could be left with a disease which is either chronic, it is temporary, it continues. And for major diseases, they have different ways of categorizing it, 1 to 4. And from a service health perspective, something which we are still kind of toying and, defining, what's an outage, what's service disruption, what impacts the customer, who causes it, how is it being caused, and do we have to live with any of these like a type of disease? Why do we have to live with it? Are there known errors? Are there recurring problems? Are these acceptable kind of issues? These are larger questions which come. So now I'll come to the case study, before which I'll give you a background about this individual and then migrate to the lessons learned. Okay. So as you can see here, can anyone identify the protagonist in this?
The little kid with you?
Yeah, it's this guy on the extreme left. Yeah. Okay, so I was part of a family. I am actually part of a family of 6. My mother, my dad, and my eldest brother, my next brother, and here. This was taken in '72 in a place in West Bengal where we were there. My dad was a railway engineer. That was his younger brother and his wife. She, unfortunately, about 15 years ago, passed away due to breast cancer in my mother's arms in our house, which is sad. Which actually is another connection which came out later. So if you notice, yeah, this is the days of, anyone here who lived in the 60s? Hensley and yeah.
What?
Yeah, early 60s. So early 60s, and back, middle class family in India. So this was a full-fledged wedding reception, the biggest party we had in our front lawn. And you would still find that in terms of dress code, as brothers, you all inherited based on your age. So if you see my eldest brother, who's a chartered accountant with a leading company, he wore a full-sleeve shirt, a tie, and trousers with shoes. My next brother, who's now a professor in UVA, he schooled at University of Oregon. So he wore at least a full shirt, a couple of inches above his leg, and shoes. That was me. No trousers, wedding party, rubber slippers, the bathroom slippers. But I was accepted. And my youngest brother was one step, ahead of that. He's a professor in UC Davis. Attended the same party without slippers, bare feet. But that's the way it was those days. We rolled like that. So after spending a couple of years, typical railway officers, children roaming around India, I decided after high school somehow that I needed to, do something. And my father said, 1 is an accountant, 2 are engineers, 1 needs to, be sacrificed for the defense. So I went into the defense. And soon after high school, I joined what is known as the National Defense Academy, and which is a combination of West Point, Annapolis, and the Air Force Academy at Colorado Springs. So I was an officer cadet. Finished 3 years there, moved on to, being a naval cadet on a ship, and then became a midshipman on a carrier which we bought from England. We got out of that and then moved on to a landing ship and then a Coast Guard ship, spent a couple of years on these ships, and where I was a navigating officer, and we kind of beached on every beach possible on the east coast and west coast of India on all the islands. And after you beach, you go there and swim also, and take a party on board with your inflatable and have beer and stuff like that. This is good fun. All beaches, I must have beached hundreds of times. Then after those 2 years at sea, they said, hey, let's, have a change of life and see what life is as a landlubber, as they say. So I volunteered for this position. I went through a series of interviews, including the president. He interviewed me. And then I landed up as his aide-de-camp for about 2 years. So it was an interesting kind of experience where you got to hobnob with a lot of, serious senior people in life without having any responsibility. But you were privy to all discussions, conversations, and you had to conduct their appointments, engagements in India and overseas. So it was very responsible. So some of these, that's where Ted can see I used my Russian, which I learned at the Defense Academy. And so I used it with both Gorbachev and Raisa Gorbacheva those days. So it was very interesting being the liaison officer, including with Yasser Arafat, asking him very tricky questions as to, hey, why can't you do this peacefully, and what's the big hold-up? So nobody could ask him that question, but I could, because I had no responsibility. And then when he went overseas, you notice that I'm wearing a big turban. So there's always a saying, that uneasy is the head that wears the crown. But in our case, we had an arrangement between the ADC and the president. He was the head and I wore the crown. So we kind of split the load that way. Then after going on, after having a ball for 2 years, they said, hey, you've got to get back to the Navy before you forget what navigation is all about. So I went back to the Navy, did some training, got back to 5-6 different ships, and then the peak of my career as a navigator was on board an aircraft carrier. So spinning her like Carl does for his ship, but she's slightly larger, about 28,000 tons, and had good fun there also. Later after that, they said, hey, you got to go somewhere and, do some stuff elsewhere, some training. So I went on to Jakarta, did some course there. That's my family on the right. One son. And then when I got back, they made me the commander of the Naval War Room for 2 years. And that was a very high tension job because you're looking after every aspect of the war room, naval operations, submarines, aircraft, ships, wartime, non-wartime, disaster relief, what the Pentagon does on a full-time basis, handling all resources, which was major, including anti-piracy ops, which incidentally, I had the word piracy on my resume, so IT product company hired me thinking that I was an expert in anti-piracy, and they wanted to stop piracy of their products in India. So that's how they did the keyword search, and sometimes, keyword helps. The second thing was my boss decided that because of, a high-stress job as the war room commander, he said once in a while you need to de-stress and go overseas on trips, which I think Matt should take up with his boss. I would probably recommend. So I got around, to Europe and South America, North America and stuff like that. That's my brother. And in case he's the one in UVA. So in case there's someone here from the Windows team who actually interfaces with the product into trying to determine what is the customer looking at, what is the customer experience, both internal, Microsoft user and external. It's a very good tool which he's developed and he runs in collaboration with the head of department in University of Washington, Tony Greenwald. And he manages that, and that's a good tool to go with, and then improve the product. And thereafter, I came back to the sea and spent a couple of years on a destroyer as the commander, and then I got out and then said after 20 years, hey, that's enough, let's go. As you say, goodbye Sam, hello Samantha. There's a song, so it's goodbye Navy, hello Tally. So I said goodbye to the Navy after 20 years and said, hey, let's see what's in the other world. Where there's a book by Thomas Friedman, The World is Flat. So I got influenced by the book and say, what the world is flat about, and let's go see what's happening there. So this is what happened. So I said, let me have some excitement. So what happened was, when I was in the Navy, towards the end, I found that I developed a disease called psoriasis, which is a skin ailment. And so there were all kinds of treatment I tried, which was non-steroid and non-allopathy, which was yoga, pranayama, and of course, art of living. I tried all kinds of stuff to avoid that stress, but it kind of stayed with me, and I had to, perforce go for some kind of steroids in between because it became very severe. So let's see what happened. So when I quit in 2004, I joined this company within 2-3 months and headed their HR, PMO, and facilities department. And within a month of joining that company, I got a very, a nagging pain in my hip. As a guy from the military, if you have pain, you go for a run. If you have fever, you do more push-ups and sweat, and the fever and push-ups, and everything goes away. That's what we were taught. We were taught that if you had pain, you were a sissy. I felt any pain, I was a sissy. So I used to only warm up more if I had pain. And the pain used to go away. But over a period of next 2-3 months, I found that the pain continued. And even in February, I was hospitalized because there was a low-grade undiagnosed fever. And they went through all kinds of tests, but nothing picked it up. Then sometime 2-3 months later, I developed a pain in my shoulder. And again, we did a whole bunch of scans, nothing happened. A little while later, the doctor said, hey, I think you've got frozen shoulder. We did everything. Nothing in the scan. So we started ultrasound, physiotherapy, and stuff like that. But suddenly, after about 6 months from the time it started, within a week, suddenly from my left hand being in a sling, my right hand went into a sling and I went into a wheelchair. I couldn't walk. So in a period of 4 days, I could not walk. And my hands could not take the weight of my hands, my shoulder. So both my arms were in a sling and I was in a wheelchair and I was desperately losing weight. And within those 3-4 days, I was really in a shock. Then my friend rushed me to the hospital where I had been just about 10 days earlier with all the scans. And this time they found lesions all over the body and all the bones. And they also found that one of my ribs here was destroyed completely, which did not come up. Which is why I tell Matt, whenever the Seahawks has a victory or, the Woodcock has a celebration, I don't go near him in case he wants to give me a bear hug or something. I say, oops, my rib is missing and, my heart may just pop out. So they said, hey, let's find out what is the source of all this malignancy. So this is what had happened. And they actually found that my left shoulder, which is supposed to be a ball and socket joint, became a gear and sprocket. And that's a non-reversible thing. So right now my hand is stuck here on my left hand. It cannot go beyond this. And it's not load bearing. It's gone. The days of push-ups and pull-ups all are gone for me. So I couldn't do any running and I was stuck pretty much. So when they did the biopsy, which takes almost a week for it to come through, they diagnosed with something known as non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, which was already a stage 4 disease because it had spread all over the disease. It hit some organs, spleen, and inside my nose, ear, all over the place. But primarily affected the lymph nodes, which is where the bones were affected first. That's where the high concentration of blood cells are there. From my perspective, I quickly did research, thanks to webmd.com and stuff like that. And then you find that, hey, those also raised the internet, of course, in India also, and I was with my laptop. So from the hospital bed, I had the strength to move my fingers with, whatever it was. And I said, hey, this is a great disease. And I chatted with my doctor. He said, this is a fantastic disease to have because it's aggressive. It is so aggressive that in 1 month you are walking and now you are flat. And in the next 1 month, if we don't treat you, you will be out. So we got to give you something fast. So I was very happy that it was aggressive. And just by chance, as a coincidence, 2 things related to the US. One is the staging method was based on based on a conference done in Ann Arbor in 1967. So this whole method of staging is called the Ann Arbor method. The second thing is this particular drug I discovered just a week ago. I attended a couple of stalls in the Commons and I met a cancer research foundation. I chatted with her and she told me that they were instrumental in doing research for this particular drug. And this drug came out only in 2002. So I was really lucky, you see. Fantastic. So I was really happy. And the other part was just to, console myself. I said, hey, who else had this? So I said, okay, if she had it, and, but they didn't survive. They passed on. Those days they didn't have the best of drugs. So then they said, hey, what do we do for mitigation? Because this guy is down. Now the orthopedic surgeon wanted to operate on my arm, put a rod through the arm and, make it strong before giving it radiation. But then I consulted with the physician and said, no, because the minute you puncture your body, you can't undergo chemotherapy. Because everything heals, all drugs take a long time to take effect. And and your body resistance goes down tremendously if you are having surgery because it's not healed. Immune system is 0. So you can't do that. So then we decided, I told them I will sacrifice my arm, go ahead, let's do radiation and chemo. So it took 3 days for them to decide on the R is the Mabthera or Rituxan, the one which was founded by that Seattle research company. And within those period of 2-3 weeks, I lost about 20 pounds. Not a good way to lose weight, I can assure you. So the next 6 months, I was pretty much laid up at home. And somebody drove me up and down. Someone took me in a wheelchair to the radiation place. Came back to the hospital bed after, a month I got discharged. And I took all these chemotherapy things every 3 weeks. And finally, the last one was sometime in the end of December, which was actually scheduled in the first week of January. And then I told her, hey, I want to finish it because I want to go for a New Year's party. I mean, I was kidding, of course. I couldn't walk. I could just walk. And then I went home after that. And I did the first scan to check, has this disease been killed? Is it back in the body? Luckily, I found it was not there, which was good. So then what did I do to mitigate this, which is key for us? The first thing was finding out what is the cause? Why did it happen? So initially, as a human being, when something happens to you, you say, what did I do wrong? What went wrong in the system? You do a diagnosis, right? You go back into history. Did I do something wrong? Is it genetic? Is it because of the stress, the fact that I changed careers and looking for a job? Is it because of psoriasis? Because of the link between steroidal drugs taken at the time of psoriasis, which reduce your body immunity because psoriasis is an autoimmune disease. And there are a lot of drugs which you see in the market, like Enbrel and all. They say, don't have it if you have cancer, because they trigger cancer. So therefore, anything that you have to suppress such things should be non-allopathy and non-steroidal. Last steroid is kind of the resort of the last resort. Or I said, is it karma? But then, being a project manager and managing so many projects in the Navy, I said, damn it, this is just another project. I'm not a statistic. So let's see what the statistics say. But I found the statistics themselves don't say anything very good. But this was pre-MapThera, till 2000. So I found that the survival rate is only 50% after 5 years. And so I said, hey, that's not a very good kind of sampling. And I said, I'm not part of this because it doesn't cater for so many things. When I went into, the factors which, when you're going into designing, when you do a root cause analysis of incidents, you want to know what are the parameters based on which that monitor was set up. If the thresholds are not correct, the monitoring is wrong, right? And then you reach the wrong conclusion. So therefore, in my case also, I said, hey, all this doesn't apply to me because I'm a unique human being. And I'm a data point. And as a data point, you could be unique because this just averages everything. So there are always exceptions to the rule. So then what did I do was, at the time the chemotherapy started, was the time I put this plan into place. So I said, I'm not going to talk about my work, my responsibilities, my finances. Luckily, everything was paid for by the Navy, which was great, 100%. And in India, if you're buying everything in rupees, $60,000 is a lot of money. And the basic thing was, I lived in the present. I had great support from my network, my family, my relatives, my parents who came down and lived with me because they cooked food for me and stuff like that. And I had to arm myself with information, proper TSGs which were not written. And one had to start writing TSGs because you were a unique person. So one of the biggest boons I had was my brother-in-law who gifted me this book. Within the second day of diagnosis, he said, Mohan, read this book. It's not about the bike. I read this book in one sitting in 2-3 hours in bed before even the main diagnosis of stage 4 lymphoma was diagnosed. And this is a very key learning I found, Pain is temporary. It may last a minute, an hour, or a day. But if I quit, it will last forever. So this applies not only to service health, to our personal health, but to anything in life. And I found it so relevant. So I said the first thing I loved about this book was this line. And I immediately designed this poster, which you see within a half an hour or so. And there's another thing there which I've hidden because it talks about his achievements in, the Tour de France. But it's so controversial. I don't want to be propagating what he's done there. But what he's actually done here, from point of view of the foundation and the book, is fantastic. So that does not take away credit from that in any respect. Like for those of us who read, Julius Caesar from Shakespeare, after Julius Caesar is killed, when Mark Antony goes to the marketplace, he makes a famous speech, friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears. I come to bury Caesar, not to praise him. The evil that men do lives on after them. The good is oft interred with their bones. So let it be with Lance. He's done a lot of wrong. That may live on. But some of the good that he has done should not be interred with his bones. So this is one effort to, promote that cause. Yes, this is really something which helped me. And this was the primary thing which helped me to survive. I'll be very frank. In addition to the chemotherapy and the MapThera. The next thing was, in addition to allopathy, I turned to a lot of spiritual intervention. I had a picture of Mother Teresa under my pillow. I used to pray to her. I did a lot of yogic intervention. My boss was a CEO, but I reported to the CEO. He flew in a Reiki healer from Chennai to Bangalore to be with me by my bedside. And he put a Reiki master from Chennai to send some spiritual ways like Reiki distance healing. When you are down, anything works. You reach out and grab anything. You're desperate. And I was desperate, very desperate. I just tried everything. I said, I'm not going down. And of course, the brother-in-law who gave me this, she used to keep coming by and helping me in bed a lot and jumping around. The next thing which is key to this whole discussion is ownership. Ownership is absolutely critical to any aspect of health within the service or your personal health. When you decide that this is what I want to be healthy, this is what I want to resurrect from the grave, this is what I want to prevent from being under a category of high risk or medium risk, what do I need to do? The first thing is to grasp ownership of that problem. Call it a problem. Who are the stakeholders? Catch over all the stakeholders, the medical fraternity, which I did, the doctors, my diet regimen, my own personal habits, the discipline I had, including, keeping my mind engaged and not worried about the disease. It's a personal feeling that you will always think about the disease if you're afflicted by that. And what if, the what if scenario plays on your mind. What if I don't survive? So there were some things which I did. From a finance perspective, I transferred everything into property quickly in a period of 1 month and wrote that whole property off in my wife's name. Because in India, getting, property in your name against your wife is very difficult. So I said, let's get all that out of the way. So financially, once I'm free, and the other person, if she lives on after me, there's no problem then for her, right? So generations after you. And the whole thing was to keep a lot of humor. I encouraged visitors when the chemo was not there, because that was the time when resistance went down and visitors were not allowed. And the key thing was ask questions. Ask questions till you diagnose what the problem is. And because the doctors themselves don't know what the problem is, and the patient usually is the most well-informed as to how you need to recover. The other thing is the daily regimen, which is the second part. First is ownership. Second is the execution and discipline. How do we ensure that once we take ownership, once you identify the problems, what is it that we need to do? And once you've identified them, we need to incorporate them as part of a process with military discipline. Luckily, I had a military background and I had no problems in adjusting to a great diet, lots of exercise, lots of meditation. Where visitors were not allowed, they were not allowed. And I try to maintain such a regimen even today because that is mitigation. I'm at risk throughout my life. Simple as that. So I'll just show you some interesting pictures here. So this is when I actually started putting on weight. This is my hospital. This is my home. That's my bed. That's my company. And I worked from home for 6 months. So right now, as some of you know, I do work from home. So Matt knows that I have some experience of working from home. So trust me, when I can work, I can work. And by the way, some HODs there because I was controlling offices in Dubai, Singapore, and all over India, they didn't even know that I was not well. I was so much in touch with, expansion, and we grew from about 80 people to 800 people in the time that I was, looking after that. So it was huge. This is my NDA course mate. He started, he owns a hotel now and sells liquor in Bangalore. So he's a fighter pilot. This is the pilot which was downed in Top Gun. Okay, the MiG-23. So he used to come by, and he's the guy who drove me to hospital. And this is my dad. So later in the hospital, you can see, I have a sling on my left hand, but I could kind of come there. He was talking about stuff there. And this is my office. So you can see Lance's poster, which I designed. So I had to look at it, because I used to feel weak at times. You cannot help it. So you need an inspiration. That inspiration has to be in front of you. Out of sight is out of mind. And of course, you can see my hair growing back. And finally, you can see I'm laughing. It is really a big kind of thing. This is almost a year after the whole thing went over. And I said, hey, I've forgotten what it was to wear a turban. Last was as an aide camp. So let's wear a turban again. So that was interesting. And then I said, hey, what are you guys doing? I said, I'm not sure whether it's the same case with Microsoft, but the culture in India is different. A lot of techies and dev guys, they don't see sunlight. So I had to pull them out, and out of 400 or 500 people, 80% of my employees participated in the marathon. 80%. We went in busloads there because we just want to show the spirit, and we were bigger than all the IBMs and Infosys Wipros put together. Bigger than all of them. And our strength was probably less than 1/20th, which was a huge achievement. But I just walked. I had a nice number too, 04001. And an interesting thing was, after the last chemo, you will see that we were launching a product called Tally 9. So I thought as head HR, I should do something different. So my friend, luckily, who was helping me all along, he had a Mercedes with his number. So I just drove in, he drove it. I couldn't drive a car because in India, you drive the car from the right side. And I couldn't drive a car for about a year in India. Someone else had to drive because my hand couldn't change the gears. Which is a good thing. I've come to US. Now I change my gears with my right hand. But even now I can't change gears. Good. So all good things happen. So then within about 11 months of the last chemo, I landed up in the US. And I said, hey, landed up in Michigan, and we tried something new, and I was jobless, and I looked for a job from the bottom rung in IT and said, hey, let's experiment something new. What's life? The world is flat according to Thomas Friedman. Let's see how flat it is. So I said, what can I do? Okay, if I'm jobless, let's at least play tennis with my right hand. So I started playing tennis slowly. Nobody knew that my hand was not well. They didn't attack my left hand. They thought I can serve well. But I couldn't smash, I couldn't serve hard because my hand was weak. It's still weak. But they didn't know that. So you just kind of ambush them everywhere and run away with the title. So this is what the rebuild phase looked like till now. So you actually found that once I came here, And then a lot of doctors here advised me in the Beaumont Hospital in Michigan that, hey, why don't you go through surgery, just replace the joint. But I'm so scared in the sense I was not feeling confident. I'm not like Clayton here, who went ahead and changed his right shoulder joint a couple of months ago. I don't have that. And maybe I'm waiting for, it's providential. Maybe I've come to Windows Phone, the right time, right place. Is there anybody from the Dev Center here? Yeah. So is there an app for that? Yeah. So if there's an app for that, I'll just sign up for it and I'll, promote him as a top developer. No problem. So short of that, and plus it has a life of only 15 years. So I'll have to do 2 replacements, assuming I have a lifespan of another 30 years at least. So I don't want to go through 2 operations to replace 1 joint. I'd rather live without the joint. So then I went through a series of tests, and the last blood work was just done about a couple of months ago. And of course, there's a lot of stress just before the test. And when you get a pain in the body, you're under a lot of stress. You're wondering, has the damn thing come back again? You don't know. It happened to me a week ago. You go through everything and you do through a process of elimination. Like you have a workflow chart, you do troubleshooting in the WPOC, and then you say, hey, no, it's just a false positive. Let's get on with it. And just mark it as closed. So that's what I keep doing from time to time. So I've been cancer-free for 7 years, which is good. But unfortunately, like in the Cold War, the famous saying, Michael, there's a saying in the Cold War, right? Where you talk about the Allies, which is the famous saying in the Cold War? Better dead than red, right? Yeah. But in my case, after the chemo went away, the psoriasis went away because the chemo killed the psoriasis. But soon after that, the psoriasis came back. So I would say it's better to be red than dead. So I would look at it. So there's always a positive spin to all that. So what then are the key lessons learned from this? What is it that we can take away as individuals in our own personal life? And what is it that is applicable to Windows Phone services as a business entity inside Microsoft? They're all common. So these are my sayings, my learnings, and this is my analysis. When we go through the lessons learned, if you want, you can interject. And when we come to the question and answer point or the discussion point, that time also you could interject and ask me anything. So the first thing which I would look at is, which is known to all of us, is that periodic health checks are important from a personal perspective, and being able to interpret it correctly. Like the problem we have with alerts not having the right alert name, and the WPOC analyst not being able to analyze because the current service name does not align with what the service was called 6 months ago, or what it was called 1 month ago. Now, because of some org restructuring, we've decided to change all the names. But what happens to all the historical runners? Who's going to change that? So it's a huge manual process. So I'm just giving an example. The next thing is, whatever metrics we select, they really need careful consideration, whether it is going to define how do we measure the MTTR? Is that something which is going to reflect customer pain? Because we are in the business of delivering value to the customer. What are all those metrics which will tell us that the customer is facing pain? That should be top priority. Second priority should be the customer probably not experiencing pain, but we are experiencing the pain. Systems are experiencing pain. That also needs to get addressed. But perhaps not as high a priority, unless this also leads to subsequent customer pain. Then it's a latent pain we need to look at. The next thing is, any mitigation plan we have is always a function of the pain threshold you are willing to bear. Either we or our customer, or the pain that we feel when the customer feels the pain. Do we feel that pain? Is it an external customer? Is it an internal customer? Is it a SAGE report which is coming out, which is sending out, say, delayed information to some people? Who are the stakeholders? And if we find that, yes, there are so many issues occurring, so we need to kind of, nip some things in the bud, focus on issues which are more important, which impact the customer more, and realizing that if we put a temporary fix in place that does not wish away the problem, we need to find a permanent mitigation. And the solution itself may not be very apparent, though it may be apparent to us from past experience. But why is the problem occurring in spite of a fix? It's because we probably didn't cater for all possible dependencies and all possible scenarios of interaction. So then one of the reasons for that is because we tend to focus on visible issues And some of the latent issues which were hidden, which were not caught by adequate monitoring and instrumentation, which was done, but which probably needs to get done in hindsight because we were not so aware, but now we are wiser, that needs to get done. So eventually, rather than having everything in a reactive mode, we would like to do predictive analysis, which was what Alive was meant for that, right? So now we probably would be doing something similar with monitoring tools we have in terms of predictive analysis, helping us to move into a healthier state and preventing problems from occurring rather than tackling problems after they occur. Because our aim is to disprove, Murphy's Law and twisting that thing of what cannot be cured, must be endured. I disagree with that. I think whatever must be cured must not be endured. That's absolutely true. The next thing is anything which, like I was inflicted where there was a huge change in my environment, and this is very common. When change takes place in the environment, when migrations take place, that is the time we always get the maximum hit because the maximum problems. Because there are so many dependencies in the service environment which we saw. So that is the time we should not rest on the fact that, hey, I think we've done excellent design work, we've done excellent coding work, we've done excellent testing. Let's just roll it out and sit back and enjoy it. It's not going to happen. Because we know that there are going to be issues because you cannot foresee everything, especially in the IT world where code is something which you cannot predict entirely. The next thing is to ensure that you minimize that and to mitigate the risk. You really need to find that how is it that we can mitigate that. Then you realize that, hey, some of the things is, let's find out what are the possible scenarios which can take place. Maybe a failover scenario, total, a disaster center going down, a full service going down due to some reason, a self-zero, Windows Live ID, something's failing, a full GNS load balancer going down without a backup. So what do we do? So those are the things we need to handle and be able to handle those emergencies. The next thing is key is, which I'll come to in the next slide also, is being aware of what is within our sphere of control and what is our sphere of influence. This is a key reason why things go wrong and why organizations do not do as well as they do. Because all of us, by design, the traditional structure is that we are assigned roles and responsibilities within organizations to focus on that so that it is defined properly. But sometimes there are some gray areas. Sometimes, like we know now, that there are so many dependencies in the organization. So we have to really look at these dependencies and manage them better. Though it may not be our responsibility, but it is indirectly ours because it impacts our service. So how can we do a better job of managing our responsibilities, which is actually a thing which someone told me some time ago is, how much of other people's garbage do we have to pick up? If I pick up my own garbage, is it adequate? Perhaps not. I'm just voicing it aloud. But this is something which all of us do. It's like sharing, problems we envisage, whether it's in Gemini or something. We're sharing it with the whole world. Hey, this is a problem I've discovered. How can we manage this better? So that's a step in that direction. The next thing is, whether you're an IC, a manager, a vice president, or the president of Microsoft, we need vertical skills and horizontal skills because the world is flat. It is no longer hierarchical. An IC can reach up to the architect and say, hey, I think I have this problem. What do you think of it? He's not going to say, hey, go away, come to your manager and tell me about the problem. He'll say, no. Okay, that's an interesting input, but has it been vetted by everybody at your level? So it gets that kind of wisdom and the brain power, behind it. So the key thing there is ownership, which I find is absolutely key to driving issues to resolution. So some of the things which come up, which I thought about, which we can have a discussion after I finish in about 2 minutes, we'll still have 10 minutes, is this is a terminology which is used everywhere, whether it's in a bug, whether it's in some task item, owner of a thing, owner of a service, owner of a bug. Who really is the owner? What is he owning? Sometimes someone gets assigned an item, he reassigns it to 3, 4 people. Should not that original owner who should have owned that problem continue to own that problem till that issue is resolved? How do we track that? You see, it's like passing the ball. The next thing is, if I'm doing something, for example, say in the WUPOC, what prevents the shift lead or the analyst from doing something wrong? Who's going to guard the guardian? This is a philosophical question I used to be asked on the aircraft carrier. When the officer of the watch is a lone person with the whole flotilla of ships, submarines acting. And the captain was asking, Mohan, who's going to guard the Guardian? I told him, sir, there's no really, no one is going to guard the Guardian. We have to just assume that whatever processes they have put into place work, and we have trained people enough. That's the only solution for that. No one can guard the Guardian. It's like, one of the things when I was talking about spirituality is pray. So that's one place where I don't think where you can add a line in the TSG. If nothing else works, pray. Right? The next thing is responsibility versus accountability. What is it that can be, this is a very interesting thing. The Marines have this clear demarcation. If you look into their credo, the US Marines, which I read in an office in Vancouver, in the US consulate, where it clearly says, responsibility can be delegated, but accountability cannot be delegated. This is absolutely key to everything. As long as an organization, we know who's responsible for what and who's accountable for what. Is accountability actually articulated by anybody? It's an open question. Or is it just somebody who takes ownership? Each of us takes responsibility and ownership and accountability for ourselves. We may also be doing it for our domain. So perhaps it is true, we are both responsible and accountable if we take ownership. So that is something which, so it's an attitude. The next thing is, which I come to is, we talk about something called managers and leaders. Actually, nobody is a manager. Everybody is actually a leader. Either you're leading yourself, if you're an IC, you're working with other people, helping to lead them, or you're leading actually other people. There's nothing like managing. In the services, we have a term, managing means just doing adequate. Leading means going that extra bit. So we have to move from just doing to a little more proactive mode, so you do a little more. Because every time you do a little more, that is, you increase your kind of accountability and ownership, automatically you would get responsibility, which gets you more jobs and more work. Because the prime reason, at least in India, where people left jobs was because of job content, not because of salaries. That was the primary reason why people left jobs. Next was because of the managers. Third was because of salaries. The first thing was job content. And Peter's principle, you all know, it is every person in an organization always rises to his level of incompetence. Yeah, that's Peter's principle. So the last bit which I would like to say is sharpening the saw, Once we know that this is what we need to do, like we're going through a reorg now, how often do we keep sharpening the saw? This is a term I've taken from Stephen Covey's 7 Habits, which I'm a great fan of, and I have been applying it for the past 15 years in my life. And that's how, one of the reasons why I got out of my hole, which I was in 2006, because I applied Stephen Covey's 7 Habits and a couple of things. So when do we do that? How much? What is the cost-benefit analysis? Because you know that, like Carl will know, in a ship we have something like, power. Typically surface ships, when they move in water, they cannot do more than 35 knots by conventional propulsion, even if you're a nuclear-powered ship. 35 knots is max. Everything else is non-traditional, you skim and go above. So, for a ship to go from, say, 27 or 30 knots to 35 knots, which is something known as 0.9 nominal to 1.0 nominal, you consume 50% more power. So then we need to draw a balance to achieve availability from 99.9 to 99.95. If it's going to consume 30% more resources, it's probably not worth it. So we need to be able to do a cost-benefit analysis of effort taken and used to implement a solution. So these are some of the things which I would like to share, which was actually part of my DNA, which I've kind of looked at and firmly believe in terms of repetition, discipline, the fact that being more disciplined seems more boring, but actually it's more peaceful. It has, goes to a peaceful life. And this is the thing which I would like to share, which I had right from the time I was 8 years old as a poster on my door in the room. So this is a monk who came to Chicago in 1897, the first Parliament of Religions. And the first sentence he used was, "Brothers and Sisters of America." And this was the reason why yoga is present. The Hindu philosophy is there in the US because of him. And the minute he uttered that word, the whole audience stood and clapped for about 10 or 15 minutes because of the rapport he created. So many of the sayings he says, it comes from deep within, and they're extremely philosophical. And based on that, that's why I say we must always live strong and fight our battles. Thank you very much. So if there are any questions, any opinions, please feel, about anything, you feel free to, shoot, and I will do my best to respond, including if somebody has an opinion on Lance Armstrong, whether he doped or not, or, I don't mind taking all those questions, I'll take them, no problem. Feel free.
Why Navy
Mike.
to change time?
Why did I need to?
Why Navy to change time?
Oh, why Navy to the civil career, you mean?
Navy.
Sorry.
Why specifically problem management? Navy to problem management.
Oh no, even in Tally I was managing problems. I was just doing different. I was managing HR there. I was heading a PMO. I set up processes I was a program manager with McKinsey. And we did a whole organization restructuring twice, what is known as a business process transformation, We went through everything bottom up, designed the comp benefits, just challenge. And also in the Navy, after 20 years, you're used to an environment and it's hierarchical. I was in the top 3 in my course, so you don't get to be ADC to the president. But at the same time, that is the time I read that book, Thomas Friedman and all those things, the globalization was taking place. And there was a lot of instability in locations because when you go up every 2 years, I changed my ship, moved to a different location, Bombay, Delhi, overseas, naval attaché, you're back. Next year, if I had continued, I would have been a rear admiral in the Navy as of now, next year. So, but it's different. I wouldn't have been able to come here. I wouldn't have been able to meet Carl and Lizzie and Candice, Michael and Ryan. That's my answer in short. It's a risk, but it's right. It's not a big risk. What is life? No one's going to kill me. Hey, you can't live in this world if you leave the Navy. I said, no. You can still live. You can survive. I'm surviving now. I tell you, I'm surviving. I'm living. More than surviving, I'm living. I'm living strong with this.
Well, yeah. So, in addition to the parallels you drew between going through the cancer experience and service management, how would you say it's changed you in terms of the attitude and the approach that you bring to work, or general that you live life?
Well, one of the things is that philosophically, even prior to the disease, I had a similar temperament, And after the disease, has it changed me as an individual? No, it hasn't. But in terms of being able to appreciate probably the value of life, to look at big issues as it's okay, they can be managed. It's not a big issue. Don't get worried. Yeah, it's not a big deal. Even in the war room in the Navy, I say, hey, is this thing going to break a war between 2 countries? Because as the war room commander, everything is a crisis. Like Matt knows, everyone wants it. Hey, it's an outage and all that. I say, hey, this is a crisis. We shot down a plane, which was from some country, and then, hey, this is a crisis. You need to trigger up all your, activations, the war contingency plans. But hey, as long as it doesn't result in breaking out of war between 2 countries, it's okay. It can wait till 8 a.m. next morning. So you look at things with a different approach. Yeah. Michael, the wise man from the east. You're on my right.
Thank you. That was really good.
And guys. Okay.
I think that wraps it up.
Anyone from the phone?
Oh, yeah. Anyone from the phone?
You all good?
I think we're good. I want to thank you again for volunteering to present on this brown bag. This is an eye-opening experience. You've done a lot and overcame a lot. Serve as an inspiration to us all in our challenges with creating and maintaining services. I want to thank everyone for coming to attendance, and I hope to see you all next week. You have to.
Yeah. Before you guys go, I thought I just picked up some from a store. So, thank you.
Because brown bags can do food and presents.
There you go.
Great.
Yeah. Thanks for coming. Thanks for coming. Hey.
Thanks, Mohan.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I would candidate. Or exactly. Medium.
I'm gonna, because I actually don't have a problem with anything that he did.
Oh, I'm looking at I wouldn't have thought of that. Me neither.
You recorded?
Huh?
You recorded?
Am I?
Did you record?
Yes, I've recorded it.
So I did not.
Yeah, I have recorded it. If you could email me the slides too, I'll put that on the wiki as well.
Slides, I don't want to take off my photographs now.
You want to take your photograph?
Yeah.
Okay.
Very controversial.
Okay. So whenever you're ready, if you could, it's like the edited slides, that'd be great.
Yeah, I'll send that to you.
Fixing $0 the day before the file now.
That is, you fixed it in a P-1 response.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Can we deploy?
My mom's
WPS push.
I stuck it, like earlier this weekend.